basically will make sure I also stick to the time allocated to me, which was 10 minutes. And what I intend to talk to you is about creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem, which actually fans out of the NEP 2020. So, can I have control of the, or people will change the slides? Can you change the slides?
Presenter unda?
Change it.
Okay. This is the only common slide that I will have from what we saw yesterday, just to get the context in place. And that is all about the NEP 2020. NEP 2020 does not at any point in time explicitly call out entrepreneurship, but it does provide enormous amount of focus onto industry orientation. There's a fairly large emphasis on it. And the second thing that you also see is that it does say that the NEP 2020's objective is to transform India into a superpower with the 21st century skills. The two things I'd just like to call out. And why do nations think about becoming knowledge economies? If you go back into the history, the first industrial revolution, the second industrial, the third, and now the fourth, all of them, every time that you saw a blip in the industrial activity, sorry, I take it back, in the technology uplift, you saw the economy is doing well. You also saw that humanity got better comforts. So therefore, all of these, you say knowledge economy, etc., what's the end result of it? End result is these two things. Economies have to become better, which is prosperity for people has to improve. The second is the living conditions have to become better. How does that happen? Products don't get created out of thin air. Products get created by people, companies, new companies. And new companies are nothing but startups, and startups translate themselves into entrepreneurs. So here is why I think entrepreneurship is very important for this nation. I'm sure many of you heard about this word called demographic dividend. The country's population, if it is more than 51% in the age group of 15 to 65, which means the working age population is higher than the non-working age population, countries are supposed to be enjoying demographic dividend. India has that opportunity right now. We have seen countries we enjoyed this opportunity in the past. The three examples that I have: South Korea, thereafter it was Japan, and then it was China. China is just getting out of the window currently. In all those three instances, we saw economies prospering and mankind became benefited because of technology. India has that advantage. India currently has 62.5% of working population compared to the non-working population. But here's the catch that comes along with the demographic dividend. As a result of this youth, as a result of this young population that we have in this nation, what does it result in? We put 1 million people in the streets of India every month for jobs. Or we put 10 million people in the streets of India for jobs. Or fast forward for at least 10 years, we'll be putting 10 million people for jobs in India. And we have enough evidence at this point of time that net new jobs created in any country around the world are created, 60% of net new jobs are created by startups, small companies, medium companies. The large established companies create only 40% of jobs. So therefore, there is enormous need for us to create startups. And startups have provided evidence saying that the 100 unicorns have created about 10 lakhs of jobs, 12 lakhs of jobs in the last 3 to 4 years. So therefore, in order to get the benefit of demographic dividend, in order to make sure that we see that there is no demographic disaster, because if you don't create jobs, that's what will end up in. We need to emphasize on demographic, on entrepreneurship. If you go back and Google on this word called entrepreneurship, you'll find these three things that Google tells about. In the interest of time, I'm not asking questions, I'll go ahead with what I want to speak. First thing is it says, people should have a business idea. The second thing is they take business risks. And the third thing is they look forward for an economic benefit. That's what an entrepreneur does. On the speed, they do a lot more than that. They create jobs, all right. That's number one. A company like mine, I have a 30-year-old history behind me. I created 18,000 high-paying technology jobs. We also accelerate innovation. Some of the best innovation in 5G technology is I don't want to say which of the research institutes which work with us at this point of time use our resources in terms of more amount of innovation. We have also adopted technology much faster than anybody else. And finally, it improves the competitiveness of the nation. So therefore, entrepreneurs not necessarily are making money, which they do. They create value. There's absolutely no hesitation in saying that. But they also participate in many more things, and ultimately in terms of nation building. Today, India, from 1990, where it was in a disaster of not being in a position to pay their foreign exchange, like what Sri Lanka is doing today, we are having $550 billion of foreign exchange reserves. Where does the money come from? There were policies of the government, but more importantly, there are entrepreneurs, there is industry which helped this government to build a $550 billion of foreign exchange. We do a fairly large amount of social work too. So I won't get into it, I can talk about it endlessly. But primarily, the government has even brought a new norm, 2% of our profits going to CSR. So there's a fairly large amount of effort that the industry puts in to bring up the levels of the society. So entrepreneurship, and I try to establish with all of you, is a very good thing to happen in the nation. So what do you require to do? The first one is, as we said, knowledge becomes extremely important. We're all knowledge-driven economies, we are. So therefore, to get this knowledge, it is going to be completely different. NEP 2020 talks about several elements of this knowledge building. It's not any longer that I can verbose in a class for an hour and the student will attentive to my verbose because he or she has many options at this point of time. So we need to make sure that the learning will become student-centric. I think Professor P.S. Murthy also used the same word. It's fairly universal nomenclature right now. And it has to be knowledge enhancing. It is not the rote learning that we want. Please do not teach classes which are, which can go, I say, no more than 12 minutes you can speak. You got to have a question, you have to have an interaction, you have to have an engagement with the student if you want to keep their attention. Some are brave enough to remove their smartphones and get connected to the social media right in front of you. The little brave people probably do it underneath the desk, but all of them are switched off at that point of time. So, but what is important for us is to make sure we create knowledge with these people. That's, I think, the first responsibility we have as teachers, as education institutions, as vice chancellors, as chairmen of higher education. Mr. Limbadri is here, Mr. Hemchandra, Dr. Hemchandra and Dr. Limbadri are here, both of them. And they're all doing that. But I think we need to move more of this. That's the first one. The second one is we need to build this innovation era. We're basically trying to get into a digital mindset of innovation. But this is not easy. I'm just trying to call out about 5 elements I believe are also very well documented, very critical for innovation. One of these 5 elements is one is ability to question. The second one is our ability to take risk-taking ability, openness, we have patience, and finally trust. We need to have because you see, it is also a fairly larger problem. Don't think it's a very simple problem that we can solve. And we're trying to get this across to many forums. Because even the social net that's there is not supportive. What does a parent think as soon as a student graduates? They like them to go and take up a job which will be secure. You go to do a startup, do innovation, thereafter it's an insecure environment. but we need to encourage them to get there. So therefore, their ability to take risks, the ability to start questioning the status quo, that's all about innovation. To be challenged, why does it work this way? And here is another challenge, is that in an environment like India, we need to think about global problems and finding global solutions. It has to be frugal innovation as opposed to innovation in the West. The third element, I believe, is incubation thereafter. You look at ideas graduate themselves, you find a solution, you iteratively improve the solution before you start going to the third circle of saying, I'll build a product. Building a product is not end of it, all of it. I mean, I've done this for 30 years. You rebuild the product, you enhance the features, you continuously become competitive. How does that happen? I'll go back to the previous slide. Is through innovation. To us, innovation is not a destination. It's a continuous process that goes on. So 3 elements I urge all of you to please look into in your schools is make sure that our students are more knowledgeable. We create the incubation centers for people to innovate. And finally, we need to make sure that they productize their ideas. So where are we as a startup nation right now? We're the third largest in the world. It doesn't still take us into where we want to get to. What do we have here is 84,000 startups today as they're registered under DPIIT. But what we require actually, if you go back to this slide of mine, if you want to create that 10 million jobs, a crore of jobs, net new jobs every year, you require 50,000 startups a year. 84,000 was the number which is cumulative. 50,000 startups, 10% succeed after 5 years, will become 5,000. 10% will then become medium-sized, that's become 500, and 50 will become large and successful companies. So it takes time, it requires patience. So therefore, that's where we are. But the good news we have is we're seeing signs of it. Look at that number called 107. That's called the unicorns. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. Companies which have valuation of $1 billion within 18 months to 24 months. Well, people extend it, it's very little flexible. But we have 107 of those people. And I belong to a generation where, it was so difficult for an entrepreneur to get money. Money was not available easily. There was to be just do venture capital funds. Whereas what we see today is that you give me an idea, I keep challenging the startups that I work with. If the idea passes me, I'll get you 5 venture capital funds to come to talk to you thereafter. So there's a fairly large amount of funding ecosystem that exists. And then where is the levels of maturity? We think the mature scene, fintech is doing very well. Health tech is extraordinary. There's lots of startups which are there in that area. Emerging sectors are more into tech is the new one. Logistics, mobility, travel, these are the ones which are emerging. Where I think we require a lot more attention is on semicon and gaming and so on and so forth. So what do education require? What's my ask from all of you? My last but one slide, I just have one more slide to go by. I'm at 13:33. That's so good. So the 3 asks I have for you is that certainly I think please start a minor in entrepreneurship in every institution that you have. I've done this in IIT Hyderabad, it's working out very well. We are fine-tuning it and fine-tuning it. We'll provide those inputs if you require. But that's the first and the foremost, to make sure the students start developing an entrepreneurial mindset. It need not be entrepreneurial mindset, we keep saying it becomes entrepreneurial mindset too, which means that they can work for others, but they own the place mentally. So therefore, I think it's important that we have the mindset in entrepreneurship. Once the ideas are there with them, the mindset is there, they have use their hands to do the products. So create a tinkering lab. That I think becomes extremely important. And the third one is the higher education institutions are required mentoring as well as acceleration. Because without mentoring, things need not necessarily go very rapidly. In the world that we live, acceleration is important, so therefore mentoring becomes extremely important. And as I said a little while earlier, please address the local social problems which have a very high impact. And finally, we are saying nurture a culture of entrepreneurship. That's what Mr. Professor B.S. Murthy said. We are trying to bring this culture. People should not have job seekers, but they should be job givers. To just give you a flavor, the right-hand picture is actually a real picture of what is called a T-Hub 2.0, which is right here in Hyderabad. With all humility, I'll tell you, I created it. It's a 500,000 square feet facility. The government of Telangana gave me money. Government of Telangana calls it Telangana Hub. People like me call it as the Technology Hub. And it's done amazing work. The fact that we have 500 startups at this point of time is a piece of work that we did. So what am I doing further in a school like Hyderabad? This is a new one that I have. I'm creating something called Cyient, the School of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. I strongly recommend please create one in your university too. And what does it have? You have a department on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, I have incubation centers. The middle is where my school lies. This is basically, my contribution back to IIT Hyderabad. We are doing the building part of it all right. More importantly, we are creating complete infrastructure. It's all the money which goes from our trusts. So therefore, but the more important one is, this is the framework we require. An incubation centers, a department, and a school. I'll stop there and say, hopefully this is useful. My very honest submission to all of you is this is extremely important. Pardon me if I'm repeating myself. I have become an evangelist for entrepreneurship because there's a need in this country. If you don't do it, I think there'll be disaster for this nation. My passion is so high, it meant a lot of work, but I wrote a book on my entrepreneurial journey. If a chance, please read the book. Some of you must have gone to do that now. But more importantly, I've been more than happy at my cost. I repeat, at my cost. I've done all this in education at my cost so far, and I'll continue to do that. Come and visit your campus to talk, not to you, to your students, to inspire them, to encourage them to become entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Subscribe to our channel